to Beyond Code, a tester's approach to pull request review. So my name is Andrea, and by surprise, I'm a tester. Besides that, I'm a lover of tea, so I'm very happy to be here in the UK, where I get all the tea all the time. I'm a lover of books, I'm a traveler, and I live by the coastal side, not by the British coastal side, but by the Baltic Sea at the northern German peak. And I'm also working in the maritime industry. But enough about me today. It's about pull request reviews. And the pull request review is in essence, the online invite to collaborate with your team members. Awesome, right? Collaboration, yay. But to give more detail about what I'm planning to cover in the next couple of minutes, like half an hour, I will give you an introduction about what is a pull request about, a definition if you are not familiar with that yet. I will quickly highlight the key elements of a pull request, and then I will walk you through a PR or pull request review from a tester's perspective. What I'm not going to cover today is this is not the code reading session. So if you have expected we go into code reading, that might not be for you. Also, in my opinion, a PR review from a tester's perspective is not a substitute for a code review done by another developer or by a coding IT professional. And as always, also a PR review will not help you to guarantee the absence of bugs. Honestly, there's never ever one. So let's start with the definition first. What is a pull request? I've gone through a couple of research. Basically, if you follow the Git process, there are different tool vendors out which all create their own definition. You may have heard about GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, or Azure DevOps. Essentially, they all boil down to the same definition, so that the pull request contains some sort of source code that contains changes and is the invite to review these changes, all based on a branch. What is a branch? I will come to that in a second. And the branch will be reviewed by the team members before it eventually will be merged into the main development branch or the main development area. Ideally, it all happens in a nice collaborative and social atmosphere, giving constructive feedback. And can I get a kind of quick feedback on who of you are familiar with pull requests? Have you heard about branching? Could you just raise your hand? Okay, then I just explain this very quickly. So I made here a little diagram of what is a branch, because that is like the foundation of what is the pull request, what's the review. Imagine this is our starting point. I'm a bit too short to show it. This is our main development branch. Also, you can call it production for the moment. Then we want to do some changes in order not crash the currently running system because our users might not be too happy. We create a branch here, work on the changes. All of these circles are called an update on the working copy, also called a commit. And eventually, once the developer is on this blue circle here, that's the start to invite the reviewer, say, can you take a look at my code? Is it any good? And here is where we are today in the talk. So where the developers would take a look and go through the source code and give their feedback, but also where the testers would start getting involved and have a check what the developer did. And eventually, if everyone is happy and agrees to, yeah, that's a good change, we merge this into the main development track again, and then the new software turns into reality for our users. That's just in a very brief overview. And to give you now a bit more meat on the bone, what is a pull request about? I will talk quickly about the key elements of a pull request we should know from a tester's point of view in order to get involved. So this is an example from GitHub, from a public repository, but you can also take GitLab, Bitbucket, Azure DevOps. They are just all different flavors and different tools, which look a bit different, which have maybe a bit of a different wording, but essentially use the same approach. So what do we have here? I'm going click. Okay, the clicker does not work anymore.
Okay.
Can you click maybe?
So it could be to
Click on the slide, then click on the.
so which
Oh,
slide?
okay.
Sorry, yeah.
All right,
This one.
we have it back. All right.
Sorry.
So we have first the navigation. On top, you see the project in which you are in. Here you can see I took an example from Microsoft. I called VS Code. It's a public one. And that's where you can start, where you can see where you are currently in, which is your repository. Here below, you see the numbers of pull requests currently. There are 500 and something about. Below that, usually you have some information about the pull request in specific, the pull request itself. It contains the title, a unique identifier as a number, the state, the author, the number of commits, and also interesting, the two branches, if you remember, just a couple of slides before, the two branches I had, which are addressed. So which was the base branch and which is the name of the topic branch. And then you have some details or some further information you can use, like the conversation where all the communication is happening, the commits, where you can see the timeline and the history of all the updates the developer did on the changes. The checks, they can be automated or manual checks. I show you some examples of that later on, how we can utilize this. And also the policy change, so you can also see the real source code changes without starting it in your IDE. And then here, the description or comments or conversation part, that is usually where the collaboration happens. So you can keep all the documentation here that can work in asynchronous and also in spreaded teams if you're working remotely. Of course, this is not the only way of how to communicate regarding pull requests and changes. We also can talk face-to-face and verbal meetings and over calls. But here, that's a nice thing to keep the changes in the pull request itself. So if you need to fresh up your memory, like 6 months later, you can go back and see, okay, that was what we did about it. And maybe we need to investigate this again. Also, we have here the reviewers or assignees. That are the folks you will invite or a developer will invite to work on the changes and collaborate. So that can be a real user, it can be a real person, or it can be also user groups. You may assign a group for testers, you may assign a group for developers, and whoever has the capacity to do it will then jump into the role and does the review. That's on a brief overview, the elements. Of course, there's way more to go, but then we can't get into the review process itself. So now it's starting to get interesting in the review process. When I started doing it, I did a bit of research. How can I review a pull request from the tester's perspective? I found a ton of materials, blogs, videos, how-to videos, lots of communication on social media. But what I haven't found was, how can I add value as a tester? They have mainly been developer-centric. A lot of was, how can I read code and how can I review source code, which is a good thing to do, but was not my primarily focus because I'm a tester. I do a bit of coding automation whenever it is needed, but I'm not a coder by heart. So I was more interested, how can I create value in reviewing the pull request beyond the code? And what I usually do when I get started and when I grab a new pull request is I go and check the policy and the guidelines. They already can bring some interesting learning and also help to improve the overall quality of our software development lifecycle. So very basic things I'm checking first, but surprisingly enough, still today, 2025, I see a lot of things don't work here. Is the status correct? Can I start already with the testing or is the developer still hands-on working on that? Are naming conventions applied? Some teams may agree on having particular naming conventions. Also, some tools are around that really enforce and can enforce that a particular naming convention is applied, like say hotfix or bug fix, whether you merge it into a develop branch or into a main branch. If you in those cases don't apply the right naming convention, it will mean by the end, you can have the nicest source code, but you're not able to merge the pull request at all. Then which branches are addressed? So if you're working with a main trunk and just feature topics branching policy, or whether you're working with a main branch and development branch policies, that depends also again on the teams and what you agreed on, but it also impacts how I will do the testing. What do I need to consider if I have a hotfix that goes directly into master and will be deployed half a day later to customers? May impact how I do a test, the changes in how I approach the testing. And what also is interesting to me is who are the other reviewers and have they given already the feedback? What was their comments and collaboration? And what stages do you have the checks? I earlier said, like, we can have manual checks and automated checks. Here you see some examples, not too many. Here we see below, there are some successful checks. Oh, yay, green, all good. Then there is something which is still waiting, means the community approval is waiting. So that's particularly where you could also put in a developer review, a tester review. And here we see a failing test, means in that instance, the build is failing. So when I see a pull request as a failing build, I would go into and check what is the build failure about and what can we do about this. So here again, I can already help the team to find issues earlier on and get software development in a smoother flow. But be aware, even a green checkmark does not say everything is good. And I experienced this while we did an infrastructure change. Our check marks have been all green. We thought like, cool, we merged it. And then we figured out the check was false green. So we haven't been aware of that. I think this is a learning for the community, from me, from our team, also take the check marks and also the checks within the pull request review within your CI/CD pipeline with a pinch of salt. Next thing I'm checking after the guidelines is the documentation. Is there a speaking title? Do I understand it? Is there some documentation about the change, about the requirements? And if they are in, do I really understand them, or are they just all gibberish to me? So while I not maybe apply the learnings from this in this at this moment right away, I will introduce these learnings and the knowledge I gain here later in my testing when I execute the application. I will put in, I maybe mentally map already out the test cases I want to do. I can already start thinking about what new test automation I need to write, what test cases I need to change. And sometimes you see the developer is like torn between, do I just open another PR and create the next feature, or do I write a proper documentation? Ideally, they write documentation, but sometimes we also can now use our tool of AI that helps us. And sometimes we cannot talk directly to our developers if they have about the documentation. And here you see in a good example, here you see a documentation like where's a reference to the problem, explains why and what was fixed. And that's really nice, but sometimes they look at this. Not bad documentation, literally no documentation. And then it gets interesting. What shall I test if I have no clue what is happening? So ask your developers, that would be my approach. Ask them, annoy them if they don't put in something. What else you could do if they are not approachable, if they're not available, if they're located in a different time zone maybe and have already not logged out for the day. Nowadays, we all have AI around us. If you're working in GitHub, you may have a Copilot license. You just go simply into the PR, ask the Copilot, hey, tell me about your changes in the application. That is really good help. My personal experience is sometimes I get the domain language a bit wrong or does not fully understand it. You can train it, expand it if you want, but it's a good start to get more answers. And the next thing, the second to last, I'm going to check is the comments with this list. When other reviewers left already their feedback, it's quite interesting to me to go through the comments. Maybe I run across something the developer asks questions like, when you implement this method like that, have you thought about the drawbacks on the performance? So it gives an indication, hey, maybe I have a closer look here on the performance. Also, in combination with the feedback and the timeline of the commits, the timeline of the commits is like the history. I can see if someone else gave a comment, if the author, if the developer did anything about it. Did they change the code, or did they just close the comment with like, I have no interest in fixing it? So that can really help also to start conversations about software quality in a broader scale. Do we give reasonable feedback? Do we collaborate? Do we take the feedback also serious in the team? And the last section I'm going to check are the files and the code. So when you go into a pull request and you have the files changed here, you will see in detail what was changed in the source code. So you see the added lines, the lines which have changed and the lines which have deleted. And as I said earlier, I'm not a coder. Still, I believe I can create value. Also was looking into the code, understanding the code, learning more about it, and asking questions. There are a couple of things listed here. It's a non-exhaustive list. You may add to it whatever feels also applicable to you. What I'm going to check. So first of all, typo. I don't need to wait until I execute, until I run the application to find a typo in some UI element or some wrong interpretation. I can do this already right away in the source code file. Also external files. If we import references, I can check if that looks odd, if that looks suspicious, or if that looks like we expected to see. Also documentation. And some teams, the user manual guides are included in the repository, and they should also be up to date. So we can also easily check the documentation before maybe the user asks us, hey, why is the version numbers from last year? And the numbers of changed files you see here can also give some interesting insights. I come to that in a bit. And finally in this list, unit tests. So I personally don't write the unit tests. That is part of the developers in our team who do that. But it can lead to very interesting and eye-opening conversations. For instance, if I see a new feature has been created but no unit test has been added along, I may knock on their door or join them at the desk and ask like, hey, I've seen that. What do you think about adding a test or two? Do you need help? Do you need to get ideas from me? Also, I can maybe expect a change in the unit test if some feature has changed. And yes, also this happens in reality. Sometimes developers comment out tests because they were not of use anymore and they are afraid to delete them. This feeling of like, I delete this piece of source code. Developers seem to have a personal pain with that. And also, I've experienced this in myself in reality that I saw a bunch of test cases have been commented out with a little comment on top. Well, the test case is failing. I don't know really why. I don't have time now. I will fix it later when there's more time. Honestly, there is never ever time. And I take then the responsibility to ask my developers what we can do about that. How can we help to create a quality product and what they may need from us as a tester, how we can support them. And now I have some examples about the files. So this is about external files. I hope you can see this all also the lower version. It says, I upgrade the installer, and on the top I see, oh, cool, the installer, which is an external package, is altered from version 1.7.1 to 1.7.2. That looks quite okay and quite right in my personal context. But I also might see something like that, that it's 1.7.1 in the past, and it should be now increased to 1.7.2 - pull request number 1234. At least it would start a conversation, me asking developer, hey, is that by intent? Because this looks like a not fully released version of the package. So do we really want to do that? We may want to do that for a system integration testing to see if it's all fine, but maybe we want not. So having already a conversation helps to make sure that we finally merge the right things. Okay, and then the other thing we can see is the numbers of files changed in the source code. That's not necessarily what was really happening in the source code, but here in this instance, you need to see this in the context of the entire blue frame. It says the interface is adjusted. The interface adjusted in that product's context usually means one file has been touched. I see almost 700 files have been touched. That sounds a bit odd. That does not really sound correct. And then I see, okay, this is a hotfix which should go into main. That usually rings an alarm bell in my head. And here, in this case, it was happening that we did a wrong branching. So initially, the developer used the development branch to create this pull request. And later on, it was decided to merge this into the master or into the main branch. And accidentally, almost the entire development branch has been published to production, to reality, to our users without noticing if we wouldn't have looked into the file numbers of files changed. So I not need to be a coder to see that is a bit odd. We can already create a lot of value here. Also to ask, hey, you know, I've seen that. Do we really want to do that? Are you sure? And the last example I have for today is about the updating manuals. So you may have user guides included, and you update them here. That's a PDF, that looks all good. But I also see here the editor has been changed. And the editor in this instance is a part of the UI in the program and the application. And that feels a bit unrelated. And from my experience working with the product, I know this is also totally unrelated. So the change might get in accidentally because the developer committed something they didn't want to commit, or they saw something and followed the scout rule. Oh, I just leave the word in a better place, so I just fixed this little thing, but I forgot to mention it. Or sometimes they just think sneaks in accidentally. Well, it might be okay for the moment to just follow the scout rule and change the thing in the editor. It would be good to inform the tester, hey, I've done the change. Sometimes developers tend to forget about that because they just want to create the next pull request. So it really helps to get also to know what needs to be tested. If I just have seen, oh, I updated the manuals, I probably only would have checked, is it the correct manual here? In this instance, I now know I also need to run the application and see the editor. That is now my last example. And you may think, oh, are you not done yet? So from the pull request review perspective, I'm done yet. And while this explanation may seem a bit lengthy, in reality, if I just do a simple pull request, which is a bug fix, going through all the text takes me a couple of minutes, maybe 5. If it's a bigger feature, it takes me maybe 20 to 30. But I can all include this learning I have on the way for my later testing. And I come to my testing while the pull request is still open, while it's not merged. And I know this is my personal reality, how our infrastructure is set up. It may work for your system, it may not. You may need to wait to get an MSI. You may need to wait until some DevOps or some tester, some developer deploys something to a test environment. But still, you can have all the notes for your later testing. You can start already writing automation or update test cases, update a mental test map. So what I now do, I run the software, including all the changes based on the branch. I include my learnings from the review, from the comments, and I explore the changes. And then I give the feedback to the developer. and we will iterate through the comment section until everyone is happy and we have final approval. Yeah, sorry, I couldn't resist having a couple of memes here.
Oh, bless.
So why am I doing that? To me, it's a shift left in testing. We heard about shift left in testing this morning, but earlier. I can just get involved earlier. I'm a curious person. I like to get involved, so that just fits good with my personality. Also, it has a preventive character. I can't count the bugs I've found, and even can't count really the bugs I've prevented, but I can help the team to create better software, and that helps us a bit better because we can say, who, like yours, we found it, not the customer. And overall, I can do testing in a better informed way, and which tester does not like to have all the information, right? So if you now want to get started in reviewing your pull request, if you're not done doing it yet, get access to your source control system. If you have not, find someone to walk you through. Can be a test architect, can be a lead developer, can be your best co-worker, can be someone in the community. If you can't find anyone, reach out to me, we will find a solution. Try it yourself, keep on learning, and never forget, stay calm in the chaos of the pull request.